Welcome to the Author to Authority podcast. And today I have with me Dana Pharant. And I'm really excited about having this guest. And, sometimes, when people approach you to be on your podcast, you kind of check them out, you look at them. And it was one of those things that I was kind of like, oh, okay, this could be interesting. But then when Dana and I had this incredible conversation, I'm like, I knew that she just had to be on this podcast. And, Dana knows all about standing out and being unique. And her personal brand really pushes people out of their comfort zone and challenges them to let go of those preconceived notions that they have and just really step in with a fierce determination to be bold, sexy, and have a fun-filled, successful life. So welcome, Dana.
Oh, thank you so much, Kim. What a great introduction.
And just before we get into it today, listeners, don't forget, I love to give things away. So if you're interested in using the power of your words to be able to attract and get high-paying clients, don't forget to grab my book, Power Words, at www.powerwords.pro/free book. So, Dana, why don't you introduce yourself to our listeners and tell them a little bit about yourself?
Oh, thanks, Kim. So I have a very different background, and to fit in with Apple's sensory things, we're actually going to allude to my brand and not give it fully away. So people are going to have to go to my website and find out more what we're alluding to. So basically, I started out. I grew up in a cult, and with that, experienced, of course, various types of abuse, and that sent me on this personal journey where I really wanted to untangle and unravel it. And through that journey, over the 20 years of finding ways to actually heal it on a deep, deep level, it sent me to this most unusual place. And again, I'm going to need to allude to this, where I found the most incredible healing. But that experience was what prompted me to really step into this, bold and, determined kind of brand where I'm inviting other people to also find a way to run their business in a way that's fulfilling and easy and, aligned with who they really are, not just running it for the sake of making money. We can all do that. But when you can actually do it from a place where you're loving what you're doing, that's what lights me up, getting people to that place.
And you know what? I think that's a really important point, because how many times as entrepreneurs, professionals, coaches and all that, we took things on not because we really wanted to do it, but because somebody told us that's how you make money.
Oh my goodness, Kim, like I could go off on a rant on this because there are all of these systems and structures and, oh, you're one funnel away from your 2 comma life. And you know what I'm referring to,
Yes.
right? So it's that illusion of that there is some sort of fixed system. And the reality is that when you look at the people who have been successful in these systems, it's because it's aligned with who they are and how they market and how they want to show up in the world. It's not necessarily that system is the key. And that's what I'm always trying to get to people, is that when you drop into who you really are and you show up authentically, you show up fully, and you're willing to be real and raw and honest, that's what lights up your clients. That's what gets them to say, I want to work with you. You have this spark. You have something that I want to be part of.
And I think it's important to note that we do need systems in our business, right? So we're not saying that we don't need systems.
Yes.
But I think it's about finding the system that truly works for you.
Yes, there's lots of systems to get yourself locked into thinking that one particular system. And it's that idea of that when you see someone who's successful doing it a certain way, it doesn't necessarily translate that will automatically provide success for you. And that's, that's one of my other beefs, is that, we have coaches out there who don't have necessarily the depth of experience. Like I have been in business for 27 years. I've been working
Mm-hmm.
with clients for almost 30 years. I have constantly finding new ways to do things. And some of these coaches are coming out and they're like, oh, well, I figured out how to do a 6-figure launch and I'm going to show you. But they know one method. And
Mm-hmm.
so it's not necessarily translatable into what's going to work for you. So yes, I totally agree. We do need systems, but you need to find the system that works for you.
And I think in today's world too, there's the lie that everything has to be online.
Oh, huge lie. I'm actually moving away. I've started announcing I am going to drop Facebook. And
Mm.
people are shocked because I've spent, 11 years building up my Facebook, but it's driving me batty. And so, let's be real. I'm really honest. But it's not bringing me joy. And if
Yes.
it's not bringing me joy, then I'm not in my alignment. And then when
Mhm.
I'm out of alignment, I'm not going to get clients. So I'm better off to not do Facebook at all and just focus on a system that's actually going to work for me.
And I think too, with the online world, we've lost sight of the fact that, getting clients, especially like sales, product sales is a little bit different than
Mm-hmm.
getting clients where, you're more service based as opposed to product based, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think, product based tends to work well online. And I'm not saying that you can't get clients online, because I have and I do. But I think I use the online as a tool. It's not the system. And for me, it's the social and the online is just giving me opportunities to create a relationship. And out of
Mm-hmm.
that relationship comes the clients.
Absolutely. That is beautiful because I think that a lot of people look at the online and think, oh, I can get a massive amount of people in a short period of time. And they miss the point that you actually have to start with building the relationships. That is always vital. It's never going to change.
Mm-hmm.
We do business with people,
Yes.
not necessarily businesses. And especially when it's service based. And like the work that I do is it's very deep, it's very intimate, it's
Mm-hmm.
very personal. We're creating transformation at a deep level. So that's not going to come from, oh, I put up a social media post and then they're like, oh, I need to work with you. Right. Let me bare my soul because I saw your post. Right.
Exactly. Exactly. And I think too, people have lost the ability to express themselves and to actually speak to people. Like the
Mm,
telephone's almost become this antiquated tool, but it really isn't an antiquated tool.
no.
Talking to people is actually, how you build businesses. I've had a couple other guests on, and one guest in particular is teaches selling on a very high end corporate level. And
Mm,
his thing is, it's all about the relationships.
very
Even
much
when you're
so.
working business to business, it's still about the people and the relationships. And I think we've lost that in today's society, where it's, you know, like you said, put up a post and all this business is going to come flooding into you, right? Well,
Yeah.
yes.
Yeah. But it really is that relationship. And in a lot of ways, it's easier to go back to some of what we would call the old school methods, right? Our
Mm-hmm.
phone and, mail post, snail mail, because people are not doing it. It stands out. Like
Mm-hmm.
really, honestly, the number of phone calls that I get, it is primarily telemarketers.
Yes.
I don't get a lot of phone calls from people who, even my friends, everybody, we all text. It's crazy. So the phone, if you actually pick up the phone and connect to people and say, how are you doing? What's cooking in your world? How can I help you? Those kinds of things, you're going to stand out so easily.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Now, I know you came prepared today with some things that you want to share with my audience. So I'm going to let you loose and let you share from your heart about things that you really feel that will help my listeners.
Yeah. When it comes to writing a book and, really putting yourself out there, that my journey, so the last book that was published, the full book, was a lot of my own personal story. And that's not the only way to go. That's one route for a
Mm-hmm.
book. But if you are going to share your personal story, I would really encourage people to say, look at what elements of the story are going to help people and what elements might be better if they're left off or
Mm-hmm.
alluded to, or because we don't necessarily want to traumatize people with our stories. We all
Mm-hmm.
have journeys that have been transformational, but they've also been hard. And I think there's an element where people can really step into being and showcasing themselves to the expert by being very meticulous in what you share and how you share it. So that would be one of the things that I've really learned from writing books
Mm-hmm.
myself, is that storytelling is an art.
Yes.
And it really takes, you want to marinate in it, right? I love cooking, right? So cooking is an art to me,
Mm-hmm.
and it's that fine tuning and putting a little bit of seasoning here, a little bit of seasoning there. So, take your time with a book and let it become a work of art that you're really proud of.
And do you think also, and we're going to talk a little bit more probably in the third section about your book writing experience, but do you think as well, with being able to build a really successful business and build your life, that it's important to understand your story and know your
Mm.
story and own your story?
Absolutely. I mean, I really think that our story is where we build from. My journey through the healing and through building, a seven-figure business and having that business go bankrupt, and then all of the journey in that, and then who that allowed me to become.
Mm-hmm.
That's all part of what I draw on in what I do and in how I write. And so I think it's important for us to own our stories, because that's also what makes us unique.
Mm-hmm.
We're always looking to, what is your, unique offer, or, what your unique selling position, that's right. Your story,
Mm-hmm.
is what makes it unique. So I do think there's an importance to own your story. And like I say, do some work to think about
Mm-hmm.
what gets shared in that story, right? Like, so I'd be honest, I am actually struggling a little bit in this podcast, because so much of my story revolves around the piece that we can't talk about today. So it's like, I can't mention it. So I'm like, so in case people are hearing this, in my voice, I'm like, oh, I go to say something, I'm like, oh, no, we can't say that. So you have to go to danapharant.com and find out more.
Oh. So one of the things that you do is you help push people out of their comfort zone. So what
Mm.
would be some hints and tips if someone, is listening to this and they're like, you know what, I'm feeling stuck, I'm feeling trapped by my comfort zone, but I really just don't know how to break out of it?
Okay, so here's my thought on the whole comfort zone piece. I'm actually not a fan of that whole expression, because I think it actually perpetuates the stuckness. So as long
Mm.
as we are thinking that where we are is more comfortable than where we're going, then it keeps us limited. But if we start to realize that it is equally uncomfortable out there as it is in here, then it becomes a choice. It becomes a choice of like, do I want to be there or do I want to be here? And that mindset shift for me is a really big piece in getting out of your comfort zone, right? I use those terms because everybody's familiar with it, but
Yes.
it actually drives me bonkers. And I think it's very limiting in that definition. So if it becomes a choice, it gets easier. And the other aspect of this is that when we get out of the need of trying to be right, trying to get it right,
Mm.
because there is no right, but when we
Yes.
give up trying to be right, then it's a matter of, does this work for me or does that work for me? Which one's taking me closer to where I want to actually be, as opposed to, am I right in being here, or am I right in being there, or am I, am I avoiding getting it wrong? That's the other big thing, right? So that's all of that concept for me of getting out of our so-called comfort zone, which is never comfortable. Have you ever been comfortable in your comfort zone? I haven't.
I think, when that comfort zone starts to form, I think part of it is a couple things. I think part of it is a protective mechanism.
Absolutely.
We form it because we think it'll make us feel safe.
Mm-hmm.
But after a while, we don't feel safe in there anymore. We don't feel comfortable in there, but
Yeah.
we're so afraid. At least, okay, the only thing about the comfort zone is it.
Yes, it's a familiar zone. I don't like calling it a comfort zone. It's familiar. You know what it is. But the reality is, I think if you're hitting on the piece that it doesn't feel safe, and yet stepping out doesn't feel safe. So the reaction is kind of like the neurophysiology that gets set up in the brain where, as a kid, if you accidentally touch the hot stove,
Mm-hmm.
then you have this imprint that's like, oh, that's a hot stove, don't touch it. So you see a red burner and you pull back. That's an automatic response. And we get these automatic responses kind of set up in our brain for anything, for stepping out, for being visible, for going for more, for having money, for not having money. We have them set up around all of those where we have this not safe. And some people have a bigger not safe than others. And it depends on what your history is and where that got imprinted and locked into your brain. So that's a big part of what I do, is changing that internal programming at a deep, deep level so that it's safe, quote unquote, to move forward, and it becomes a choice. When both are neutral as far as the energetic resistance to it, when you don't have a resistance to staying where you are and you don't have a resistance to moving forward, you will naturally move forward. That's the beauty of it. But we have to remove those triggers and programs that are in that say it's not safe to move forward.
So true.
Yeah.
So true. So let's talk about your actual book writing experience, because many of the listeners will also, some people will be authors, but a lot of the people listening to this are entrepreneurs and professionals, and they're thinking about becoming an author. So I always love to include this little section, because sometimes I think as entrepreneurs, we get the idea that, we can't write this book. And so I'm loving hearing all these stories from people who are just like everybody else, who said, you know what, it wasn't easy, but I did it. So
Yeah.
Can you share with me maybe one of your bigger struggles that you went through when you were writing your first book?
Okay, so I have, at this point, I have 4 books out. And so the first book that I wrote was called Beyond Fear. And that book was actually very easy for me. So I took the easy route. And here's a tip for everybody: if you want something to like just get that first one done. I had a daily email that was going out with tips and tools.
Mm-hmm.
And I took my daily emails, I pulled out 90 or 100 of them actually, and then paired them up with exercises for people to take the tool deeper. So I immediately created a book that was a good size, 200-page book, wrote the foreword, wrote the back, did all the things. I was able to do that in a weekend. So one weekend I sat down, I wrote and I edited, and then I sent it off to my editor, and we started the process of getting the cover and all those pieces. So within 30 days, I had a physical copy of the book in my hand.
Wow.
Yes. Now we also had a deadline, so we were hustling. It was like I had 2 days to spare on that deadline. So that first one was easy, even though it was rushed, but I had somebody help me. That made a huge difference. Definitely hire somebody. It is just so much easier if you hire somebody. And then the second book, because it was my personal story, I really took my time. It took me 18 months to write the second one.
Mm-hmm.
And, I would write, and because I'm sharing like really raw, vulnerable, and the edgy pieces where it's like, oh, everybody's going to judge me for this, I would write a chapter and then I'd have to like go through therapy, have some time, come back, write again. So it was a real journey. And then again, the actual editing and whatnot, hire somebody. I hired professionals to do that piece. So it was really fulfilling, both books, but for different reasons.
Yes.
So yeah, highly, highly recommend the process.
And I think too, and I've experienced this with some of my clients, like some of the books that we've done do share people's stories, but it's not as deep. Other books, we've gone very deep into the story because the story was key to the transformation that people needed to see. But, there's kind of two elements when it comes to your story and writing a book. So, every nonfiction book should have story elements in it to begin with. But, when you're sharing your story, it's a journey. And sometimes I found for some of my clients, it took a lot longer to write the book, but writing the book itself was part of their healing process.
Absolutely. Oh my goodness. I know so many of my friends who have had the same experience, that catharsis that comes from writing the book. So it's kind of a cheap therapy, right? If you write your story, but then not only write it, but you're also writing and then editing and, really looking at it from the perspective of what do I want the reader to get from this story. That whole journey is a huge cathartic experience. It's very powerful.
And I want to go back to just something you said before earlier on in the podcast. And I think it's really important because this is another issue that we deal with our clients is sometimes how much of your story do you share? And, I'll hear your thoughts on it. But one thing that, I teach my clients and the people that I teach how to write the books is that, you write the parts of your story that people need to hear to help them overcome their parts of their story. And I think sometimes too, when it comes to cases with abuse and stuff like that, you sometimes have to be very careful about what you write, especially if, some of those people are still alive.
Yeah, there's that. And I think also you don't want to re-traumatize people. So if they're
No.
reading your story, they don't necessarily need to relive their own trauma. I remember hearing a woman, and I love how she told her story, because she was, her and her husband were volunteering in Africa, and they were, kind of living out missionaries, and they were both in their 70s, early 70s. So this is, not spring chickens, and they got broken into the one night, and, these 5 men came in, and this was at night, they were sleeping. And she said they did what men do with a naked woman. And that's all she said. And it just, you knew what happened, but she didn't go into the details.
Yes.
And then she also honored what happened without needing to make herself the victim or make them the persecutors. And then went into the journey of what they learned from it and how they were able to heal and how they were able to forgive these men who came in and did this. And I thought that was so beautiful and so powerful. And that's the example that I love giving to people, because especially with sexual trauma, like people can get this, that alluding to what happened without giving the details is really, really powerful. And then more of the time spent in how did you heal? What was the journey? What steps did you take? Where did you fall down and get back up, and fall down and get back up? And, you look at even storytelling in movies, that's really what's happening, is they give a little bit of the junk that happened, the trauma. And then the rest of the storytelling is this up and down process.
Yes.
Getting to eventually to the overcoming.
And I that was actually what I was just about to say, is the fact that, when you're dealing with these kinds of issues, it's not about what happened to you. People need to know. They don't need to know in great detail, but they need to know. But like you said, it's about that journey of healing, because that's how you help somebody else heal. People need to know what happened, but the most important part is that you're not there anymore. You're not that victim anymore. You're not that person anymore. And you were able to overcome it.
Yeah. I find that, I share enough details that people can get a grasp of how far I've come. So when they look at my life today, they're not going, oh, well, you've always been a strong, powerful person. When, right? It's like, I wish, I wish. But, sharing some of my things of saying, that I grew up in a cult gives them a perspective that when they see this strong, powerful businesswoman, that there's a lot that I overcame.
Yes.
And in doing that, I have a lot to give to help other people overcome.
And I think it's important too, because it just shows that, because sometimes, we see people where they're at now and the success that they have now and what they've been able to accomplish now.
Mm-hmm.
And people think that that happened instantly. Well, no, that didn't happen instantly.
No.
Like I didn't go, I spent many, many years as an entrepreneur failing, learning skills, overcoming mindset. I mean, just to be able to write my first book was a humongous process. And if you want to hear more about that, go back and listen to the first episode. I share some of my story. I don't want to get into that again today, but, you have to realize that you have to start somewhere and then you move forward. And each stage you grow into a different person who can handle more.
Yes. Yeah. And then you have a new challenge, which grows you more. And you have a new especially if you're doing business. I tend to think of business as a extreme sport. Right?
I would agree with that.
Yeah.
So Dana, how can people find you, get a hold of you, find out more about you, all those wonderful things?
Yeah, so I'm very fortunate. I'm the only Dana Pharant in the world. So the last name is spelled Pharant. And so if you want to head over to danapharant.com, or you want to just Google search my name, you will find pages and pages, because I'm the only one. It's great.
And when they're on your website, what would you recommend they check out?
So there's lots of free things that you can be poking around in there. There's if you go over to YouTube, there's also a lot of great videos in there that go into the tools. I'm trying to think whether there's a link to the other site to get the copy of the book, because I can't say the website without saying what the thing is. So because you can get a free copy of the Become a Badass in Business through the other website. So hopefully there's a link from my danapharant.com to that.
Now, can they also find that book on Amazon?
They can, yes. So if you go into Amazon and Google search Become a Badass in Business, or Amazon search my name, you'll find those books.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Dana, for being on the show today. And if you're curious, I suggest that you check her out. And you know what? Thank you so much. I think today's episode will just really encourage people, especially those with difficult stories, to know that you can share your story in such a way that empowers people and also sets you free at the same time. So thank you, Dana. And this is Kim Thompson-Pinder. We'll see you on the next episode.